Silence, before the world began, was not empty. It was full of a stillness that did not yet know the agony of time. And then, without a reason, the veil parted, and being was flung into the scream of existence. That scream echoes still, inside every heart that dares to feel, every mind that dares to think. We do not awaken into joy, but into hunger that cannot be fed, for it is not of the body. It is the will itself, blind and threshing, that gives birth to life and to suffering in the same breath. From the first gasp of a newborn to the final exhale of the dying, existence is a wound, dressed up in rituals, distractions, and illusions. The child reaches for the breast, not knowing that the need will only multiply. The adult reaches for purpose, not knowing that meaning is the mirage that dances just out of reach, forever luring, never landing. We are not here to be fulfilled, but to be emptied, not by choice, but by the very nature of being. The world is not a place of flourishing, but of decay. Even the stars burn toward their own disappearance. This truth is not cruel, it is simply bare, and bareness terrifies the one who has been clothed in hope. For what is man, if not a beast who dreams? A beast who constructs vast cathedrals of meaning, only to find, at night, that his soul remains unlit. The mind, when quiet, does not hum with joy it broods. It returns to its ancient sorrow, that whisper which tells the truth. All striving is suffering. The will moves, and in its motion creates conflict, tension, and pain. Even love, that highest of illusions, is nothing but the will's disguised sire, seeking its own image in another, hoping to escape itself through fusion, and always returning to solitude. Modernity mocks this stillness. It replaces silence with noise, reflection with spectacle. The market sells joy like a drug. Each purchase a temporary anesthesia against the gnawing void. But the void is patient. It does not rage. It simply waits beneath the surface of every fulfilled wish, every vacation, every orgasm, every promotion. And when the thrill fades and it always does, it returns with deeper hunger. The will, like a fire, does not extinguish through satisfaction, but through starvation. And man, trapped in his own inner furnace, feeds it daily with his own illusions. What, then, is progress? A mirage on the desert path of becoming. The ancients suffered, we suffer. The only difference is that we now suffer in high definition. Technology makes the world louder, faster, more accessible, but never more meaningful. The same void stares out from behind every screen, every headline, every innovation. The future is a chain of promises that never arrive. Each new dawn whispers, "This will be the day," and each dusk replies, "No, not yet." Thus, we walk in circles on a path we call forward. And the circle is not a mistake. It is the very geometry of the will. How strange that the more man conquers the world, the more estranged he becomes from himself. For self-mastery is not gained through domination, but through detachment. And detachment cannot flourish in a world addicted to becoming. The will hates stillness, it trembles in its presence. For stillness is death to desire. And yet, only in that inner death does freedom begin. Not freedom to choose, but freedom from choosing. Not liberty to indulge, but release from needing. The soul, when stripped of its ornaments, reveals no triumphant core, no sacred mission. It reveals absence. And in that absence lies peace, not the peace of achievement, but the peace of surrender. To know this is not to despair, but to see clearly. Despair arises only when one clings to hope, but surrender is the clarity beyond hope. It is the knowing that nothing more is required, because nothing more is coming. The suffering was never a test. It was the truth. Even the body, this flesh machine of the will, is built to break. From the first moment, it is in decline. Youth is not a peak, but a brief illusion before decay. And yet we celebrate youth, we chase beauty, as if to pass time by looking the other way. But time does not wait. It seeps through skin, bends the spine, dulls the eye, and still we pretend we call it aging, as if it were an achievement, not erosion. Every wrinkle is a line of surrender written on the face. And yet this too is not tragic, it is simply what is. To mourn, it is to mourn rain for falling. Culture this dance of masks teaches us to pretend to care, pretend to matter, pretend that success is noble and failure shameful. But all achievement dissolves in the acid of time. All legacies are dust. The empires, the monuments, the philosophizal return to silence. And in that silence, what remains? Not the applause, not the titles. Only the self, naked and bewildered, finally glimpsing its own futility. The wise man does not rise above this, but sinks into it with eyes open. There is a strange solace in futility. When one finally stops struggling against the current of becoming, one begins to float, not toward joy, but toward quiet. And in that quiet, something ancient stirs not, a god, not a mission, but a recognition, that the self was never real, the world never permanent, and the struggle never necessary. All that remains is awareness, not as a tool, but as a flame that flickers calmly in the abyss. Even grief, which claws at the heart like a wild animal, is holy in its honesty. It does not lie, it does not flatter. It tears away the curtain and shows that attachment is suffering. That love, however, pure is still a form of longing, and longing is the echo of lack. To grieve is to touch the real, without armor. And in that moment, one sees. The deeper the love, the sharper the suffering. For the will binds us not only to things, but to their loss. Do not pity the one who sees this. Pity the one who does not. For blindness may bring comfort, but clarity brings truth. And though truth does not soothe, it liberates. Not by changing the world, but by changing one's relation to it. The world remains a wheel of pain. But the one who sees the wheel for what it is, no longer spins with it. He watches, he breathes, he endures, not with hope, but with resignation. To resign is not to give up, it is to give into yield to the flow of what already is. And in that yielding, a strange kind of strength emerges. Not the strength to act, but the strength to be still. The stillness of the mountain, not the triumph of the hero. The mountain does not fight the wind, it weathers it, and so too must the soul. Not by clinging, but by letting go. Not by striving, but by knowing that striving is the cause of pain. And so the candle burns not to light the room, but to reveal the darkness it cannot dispel. Each flicker a sigh, each shadow a reminder that illumination does not abolish the night, but only teaches us how to see in it. Suffering is not the shadow of life, it is its substance. The world is not marred by pain, it is born of it. Every breath is a wound, gently reopened with each heartbeat. We do not stumble into suffering as an accident of fate, we are stitched into it, woven from it, as the spider is bound to its own web. And the more we seek to flee it, the more entangled we become. The will does not rest, it thrashes, it longs, it burns. And in that blind burning, it gives rise to existence itself, a ceaseless storm masquerading as life. Look closely at the face of joy, and behind its smile you will see the hunger that forged it. What we call happiness is merely the momentary silence between two agonies. A lull in the storm, mistaken for the end of it. But the clouds always return, darker and heavier. We chase satisfaction like a mirage, not knowing that the desert itself is the truth. One desire is met, and another is born in its place, sharper and more insistent. The will consumes its own children and asks for more. It does not learn, it does not rest it, only wants. In this restless wanting lies the core of all illusion. The illusion of love, which promises union but delivers dependency. The illusion of purpose, which masks repetition with the costume of meaning. The illusion of progress, which swaps one kind of suffering for another and calls it evolution. Even the illusion of self, which pretends there is a singular I who experiences, chooses, achieves, when in truth, there is only the current of the will, moving through forms it itself has created, like a ghost trapped in its own dream. To see clearly is to feel the walls of the self dissolve, not in ecstasy, but in quiet horror, for there is no fortress, no sanctuary-only movement. The thoughts, the desires, the identities we cling to are like autumn leaves in wind, swirling with the illusion of control. But control is a fiction told to soothe a frightened animal. The soul does not guide the will, it is dragged behind it. eyes wide open, watching as life unfolds like a wound that cannot close. What then of morality, of conscience, of ideals? These too are invention-scoping mechanisms of a being caught in a trap and desperate to believe the trap is just. We invent codes to dignify our bondage. We call virtue the endurance of pain, but there is no justice in the world, only cause and effect. The good suffer, the wicked thrive, the weak are crushed, the strong rot from within. The will plays no favorites, merely moves, grinding all beneath its weight. Ethics is but aesthetics applied to suffering. And yet, there is a strange nobility in seeing this without flinching, not in denying pain, but in allowing it to reveal what lies beneath. Detachment is not numbness. It is the quiet clarity that arises when one stops arguing with what is. The man who detaches does not flee the world, he sees through it. He walks among illusions, but believes in none. He loves, but knows love's cost. He lives, but does not mistake life for a gift. He suffers, but without complaint for. What is complaint but the will disguised as outrage? There is peace in this awareness, not the peace of satisfaction, but the peace of release. The kind of peace that comes not from having less pain, but from needing less pleasure. To be still while the world spins, to see the vanity of striving and yet still move gently through the hours. This is not wisdom in the eyes of the world. It is failure, cowardice, withdrawal. But in truth, it is the only escape that does not require a lie. All other exits are illusions. This one alone is silent, bare, true. Even the body begins to reveal its secrets in this stillness. It is not a temple, but a cage. A beautiful, decaying cage. It promises sensation, but only to bind us deeper. Hunger, thirst, lust, fatigue each a chain. Even health is a burden, for it invites more striving, more doing, more wanting. And when the body weakens, we panic as if a failing body were an injustice, not the natural end of use. The body does not betray us. It fulfills its function, to carry the will until it burns out. And when it does, when death comes, it is not tragedy. It is completion, not the conclusion of a story, but the extinguishing of the fire that wrote it. Death is feared only by those still clinging to illusion. To the one who sees, death is not enemy, but release. Not darkness, but the end of blinding light. The self dissolves, the will falls silent, and for the first time there is no more becoming. Just the still, black peace that was always waiting beneath. How strange, then, that we mourn the dead. We cry not for them, but for ourselves. We cry because we too must go, and the thought terrifies us not because we will be gone, but because we know we never truly were. The self, so carefully constructed, so jealously guarded, slips away like mist. And in its place is nothing, not failure, not punishment, just nothing. The womb of silence returns, and the scream ends. This, the final mercy. Religion, art, philosophy, they are all attempts to soften this truth. They give the soul a narrative, a frame, a shape. They dress up emptiness and call it eternity. But eternity does not sing, it does not comfort, it waits. And in that waiting, it watches all our masks fall. The sacred texts, the divine visions, the promises of afterlife all dust, all whispers of a frightened will. Even beauty, which seems to rise above the fray, is only pain made pleasing. A sunset that reminds us of endings. A melody that echoes a longing we can never name. Beauty does not redeem suffering, it only makes it bearable. In this realization lies the birth of true solitude. Not loneliness, which craves company, but solitude, which embraces the absence of need. The one who sees no longer seeks. He watches, he waits, he suffers, but without illusion. And in this, he finds a strange kind of grace note given by gods, but uncovered beneath the ruins of self. A grace that does not shine, but endures. That does not offer answers, but silence. That does not promise peace, but permits it. So let the world continue its dance. Let it sell dreams, preach progress, celebrate victories. Let it fill the air with noise, the streets with motion, the mind with distraction. All of it is movement without meaning, And meaning, if it ever existed, was only the will speaking to itself in a language it could believe. But belief has fled now, like a bird escaping a burning tree. What remains is ash. And in the ash, stillness. All that dazzles is distraction. The feeder of the world performs endlessly, not to reveal, but to conceal to keep the mind in motion, so it does not feel the abyss beneath. Culture, artifice, fame, ambition each, a veil stretched thin over a silent void, and man, afraid to stop dancing, keeps spinning, lest the music end and the silence speak. But the silence always speaks. Beneath the laughter, beneath the applause, beneath the praise and the kiss and the triumph, it murmurs, "This too shall fade." The fading is not punishment, it is the rhythm of all things. The flower blossoms, not for joy, but because it must, and then it withers, because it must. The same law governs galaxies and gestures. All forms, no matter how bright, curve toward dissolution. And to love a form is to love what is already vanishing. The hand we hold, the face we adore, the voice we cling to all are leaves in the wind, already half gone. To not see this is to live in delusion. To see it is to weep, but also, perhaps, to wake. Love, in its purest form, is not a gift, but a chain. We tether our joy to another's presence, and in doing so, we invite despair. For no presence endures, and all closeness carries the seed of separation. The greater the love, the deeper the wound when it is torn away, and it is always torn away. Through death, through distance, through the slow erosion of intimacy, the lover becomes stranger, the child becomes memory, the friend becomes ghost. And yet we love, not because we are brave, but because the will commands it. It is not choice that binds us, but compulsion. The will uses desire to perpetuate the agony of becoming. And in this agony, the self is formata, trembling construction, born of longing, fear, and need. The ego is not an essence, but a symptom. It arises wherever pain seeks explanation. We believe in I because we cannot endure the thought that there is no one suffering, only suffering itself. But the I is a mask worn by the wound. Time deepens the wound. It does not heal. It drags us forward, pretending we are progressing, when in truth we are merely unraveling. Each year another thread pulled loose. Youth dreams of future. Middle age clings to present. Old age mourns the past. And all three live in illusion, for the future is barren, the present is vanishing, and the past never was as it seemed. Memory is a liar, softened by longing, shaped by the will to find meaning where none exists. And what of hope? Hope is the cruelest illusion of all. It is the sugar that coats the blade. It keeps the animal moving toward the slaughterhouse with a song in its ears. Hope blinds us to what is and seduces us with what might be. But what might be never comes not in the way we crave. The hoped for thing arrives, and it is not enough, or it does not arrive, and we suffer. In both cases, the will triumphs. It keeps us moving, aching, grasping. Hope is not light, it is bait. To detach is not to renounce life, but to see it clearly. To stop dressing the wound and begin living with it exposed. Not in bitterness, but in stillness. The detached do not hate the world. They simply stop asking it to be different. They cease the endless negotiation with pain and sit quietly in its presence. And in that presence, something opens. Not joy, not salvation, but space. The space where illusion cannot grow. Freedom is not found in possibility, but in renunciation. The one who has nothing left to want is the only one who cannot be enslaved. But such freedom is not glamorous. It is silent, austere, invisible. The world does not celebrate the one who walks away. It celebrates the performer, the achiever, the one who doubles down on desire. But he who walks away is the only one who sees the game for what it is, a spinning wheel with no destination. This walking away is inward. The body remains. The speech continues. The face smiles. But inside, the fire has gone out. The will no longer commands. Its voice is heard, but not obeyed. The soul becomes an observer, no longer a participant. And in this observation, a different kind of knowing emerges. Not the knowledge of facts, but the wisdom of silence. A knowing that does not speak, but understands. Even pain becomes different under this gaze. It no longer demands explanation or justice. It simply is, and because it is, it teaches. Not lessons of virtue or character, but the simple truth of limits. Pain reveals where the will ends, where the illusion of control dissolves. It is the boundary that the ego cannot cross. In suffering, we meet what we are not, and in that meeting, the self weakens and awareness deepens. The world may continue its wars, its songs, its celebrations, but for the one who sees, all of it becomes background noise, a dream within a dream. He no longer expects anything from the world, and in doing so, is no longer deceived. He walks through its markets and its monuments, as through a graveyard, respectfully, silently, knowing that all of it is already dust. The quiet grows. It is not emptiness, but fullness without need. The kind of fullness that does not overflow, but rests. Nothing to prove, nothing to seek, nothing to defend. The soul becomes like water, formless, calm, deep, no longer pulled by currents. It simply receives the reflection of the sky, then lets it pass. To be this still is to be free of the will not, by escaping, but by ceasing to turn. Others will call it death in life. They will mistake calm for apathy, detachment for despair. But the one who knows, knows. He sees the faces of illusion and nods. He does not hate them. He simply no longer bows to them. And in this strange absence of will, something unnameable remains. Not self, not God, not purpose, just presence. Quiet, gentle, unassuming, the kind of presence that makes no claims and needs no witness. It sits in the corner of existence, watching the parade pass by, unmoved. There is a peculiar ache that settles in the heart once the veil has lifted. Not the agony of loss, but the calm sorrow of clarity. It is not loud, it does not cry out. It sits quietly, like an old companion beside a dying fire, offering no comfort, only presence. One begins to feel not grief for a particular thing, but grief itself as the ground of being. The sorrow is not because something went wrong, it is because nothing was ever right. From this vantage, one sees the world not as a place to change, but as a symptom to understand. Suffering is not an error, it is the texture of reality. Every tree grows in struggle. Every creature claws its way through pain to live a little longer, only to die as all do. Nature is not cruel, for cruelty implies intention. It is indifferent. The lion kills not to be evil, but to obey the hunger it did not choose. And man, though he writes laws and builds temples, is no different. He too is driven by forces he neither sees nor commands. The architecture of society is an attempt to make this horror bearable. We build institutions, traditions, roll-sol to shield ourselves from the rawness of existence. Marriage, employment, status, identity, they are not truth, but scaffolding. We climb them not to reach the heavens, but to avoid the void, and yet the void remains. It waits patiently beneath the polished floors of civilization, beneath the clamor of the crowd. It knows that every edifice falls, and when it does, there is only the silence it never left. This is why so much effort is put into distraction. The will knows it is unwell but cannot stop, so it demands noise, movement, novelty. We scroll, consume, converse, pretend. Every idle moment must be filled, for in the stillness the truth returns, and with it the unbearable weight of being. We would rather be tormented by chaos than touched by silence, for silence speaks too honestly. It says, nothing lasts, nothing satisfies, nothing saves. Even spiritual longing becomes corrupted by the will. The seeker wants freedom, but as another possession. He prays not to transcend desire, but to fulfill it in subtler forms. The gods he invents are reflections of his omnipotent comforters, eternal protectors. He kneels, not in reverence, but in barter. His worship is a negotiation. But the true sacred has no interest in our yearning. It does not speak, it does not answer. It simply is, unmoved, unchanging, cold. In such a world, what is left for man? Only this: to cease asking life for what it cannot give, to stop demanding meaning, fairness, permanence, to live with eyes open and hands empty. This is not nihilism, for nihilism is still a rebellion. It still demands something. Resignation is quieter, it asks for nothing. It sees, it understands, it endures. Art, perhaps, is the last honest gesture, not because it redeems, but because it reveals. The painter, the poet, the composer, they do not fix the world, they simply hold a mirror to its wound. And in that reflection, there is a fleeting recognition, a sigh, a silence, a slowing of the will. Beauty, when real, is always tinged with sadness, for it shows us what might have been had the world not been as it is. It shows us the ghost of joy. But even beauty fades. Even the greatest works decay, forgotten in the shadow of time. Memory, too, betrays. It is not a vessel of truth, but a canvas of longing. We remember not what was, but what we needed it to be. Nostalgia is the will's final defensa golden mist, thrown over a crumbling past. And when even that mist lifts, we are left with the bare facts. We were here, we suffered, and we left no trace that time will not erase. This is not cause for despair. Despair is the refusal to let go. But when letting go finally occurs, what follows is not despair, it is stillness, a kind of inner winter. The trees are bare, the sky is grey, and nothing moves. And yet, in this lifelessness, there is peace. No promises, no pretenses, only what is. The ground underfoot, the breath in the lungs, the absence of demand. Others may not understand. They will look for joy in your eyes and find instead the calm of one who no longer hopes. They may call you broken, but you are not broken. You are merely done pretending. And that is a rare and sacred place. From here, one can finally live not in pursuit, but in presence. Not in defense, but in observation. Each moment becomes a fading note, not a building block. You do not construct a life. You witness its slow unraveling and nod. You touch things gently, knowing they will pass. You love without grasping. You speak without persuading. You act without ambition. This is not detachment out of fear, it is detachment born of vision. Even dreams become less necessary. They once were escape routes, windows into otherness. But now you see that no dream can undo the structure of reality. Sleep comes, but not as a sanctuary. It is simply a pause. And waking is no longer a re-entry into purpose, but into form. The body moves again, the breath resumes, and the cycle continues. But something inside you remains unmoved, not numb, not absent, simply untouched. This untouched place is the final refuge. It does not grant immunity from pain, but it does offer perspective. You suffer still, but without confusion. The pain is sharp, but it no longer shocks. It is expected, like rain. In autumn, you do not resent it, you let it fall, and when it passes, you remain quieter, deeper, still. There is a moment, not marked by time, when the struggle simply ceases. Not with victory, not with collapse, but with stillness. The hand loosens, the breath lengthens. The search ends, not because it was satisfied, but because the seeker has vanished. There is no applause, no revelation. Only the quiet fact that what was pursued no longer beckons. What once burned now flickers dimly in some distant corner of the mind, unattended. The will ferocious, blind architect of agony has grown weary of itself. What remains is neither joy nor despair. It is something older, something wordless. Like the hush that follows a long storm when the land lies wet and broken and calm. The soul, stripped of its ambitions, its yearnings, its little dramas, sits like stone in the riverbed weathered, unmoving, unseen. It has no message, no doctrine. It does not speak, because it has nothing left to ask. The silence it inhabits is not a void, but a return. Even thought becomes less urgent. Ideas lose their edge. The mind, once a forge of schemes and fears, cools into reflection. It no longer claws at questions. It no longer sculpts futures out of fog. It merely watches, like the moon watches the sea, indifferent to the waves. To see clearly is not to gain control, it is to lose all need for it. The world rolls on with its screams and seductions, and the soul no longer chases after it like a beggar. It lets it pass. Time, once a tyrant, softens into abstraction. The hours no longer weigh. The future, once a looming specter, loses its shape. There is only now bare, fleeting, unpossessable. And even this now is not clung to, It drifts, like a feather in still air. The one who has seen through the veil does not clutch at moments. He lets them dissolve on his tongue, like snow, sweet only because they do not last. The body, too, becomes quiet. Its hungers no longer scream. Its pleasures no longer deceive. It does what it must eat, sleeps, moves and no more. It is a vessel, a shell, nothing to identify with. The face in the mirror is no longer a self, but a mask that has served its time. It ages without resistance. It fades without protest. And the soul, having disowned its reflection, simply watches it go. What of love? It remains, but transformed. No longer an attachment, a possession, a hope. It is now a compassion without object, a sadness that embraces all things. To love in this state is to see clearly the fragility of every being, the quiet despair behind every smile. One does not reach out to save, for there is nothing to rescue anyone from. One simply stands beside, in presence, in silence. This is the only tenderness left, to be there and ask nothing. So the days continue. The sun rises and falls, indifferent to the dramas of men. The seasons turn, grinding their ancient wheel. Birth, toil, longing, death, the old procession marches on. And the one who has awoken walks among them like a ghost, touching nothing, asking nothing, needing nothing. He does not withdraw in bitterness, but in understanding. The world is not to be blamed. It is as it is, and it cannot be otherwise. And yet, in this detachment, there is a strange warmth, not the heat of passion, but the low glow of acceptance. The soul no longer fights the cold, and so it feels it less. It no longer demands warmth, and so even the smallest flame becomes enough. A bird's call, a leaf falling, a breath in the dark hole become sacred. Not because they mean something, but because they mean nothing. They are simply there, and being there, they are beautiful. To live like this is not to be free in the way the world understands freedom. It is to be unbound by the need to be free. It is to see the cage and no longer rattle its bars. The door may remain shut, but the prisoner no longer paces. He sits, he breathes. He smiles, not because he is happy, but because he is no longer deceived. And when death comes, and it always comes, it is not enemy, but arrival. Not the loss of life, but the dissolution of illusion. No drama, no terror, just the final loosening of the last knot of the will. The last breath is not a protest, but a sigh. The world slips away, and nothing is lost. For there was never anything to hold. There was only the dream, and now it ends. The silence returns, not empty, but full. The scream that began the world is gone. The longing that shaped the life is quiet. There is no more becoming. Only being, not yours, not mine. Just being. And it does not need us.